They have a combined 12 years in the National Football League. They combined for 65 career sacks, 232 tackles, 1 Pro Bowl selection, and 1 Employee of the Month award.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
It's Train and Grose on the All AZ Podcast Network.
Welcome in episode 67, Train and Grose. Virgin Berry, Mike Grose, Sean Crespin, thanks for joining us. And it is episode 67, B-Train, and as I've been doing recently, looking up numbers of our players from the National Football, well, I guess depending the numbers, we could do any, but I've been sticking with the National Football League, a lot of linemen in here. I'm going to give you 3 names, and I'm going to let you pick this time since I made the decision the last couple weeks. Number 67, which is Bob Kuechenberg, old Miami Dolphins, of course. Okay. Reggie McKenzie.
Okay.
Or former Arizona Cardinal Louis Sharp.
Well, Louis Sharp, I mean, of the 3, that's the name that I know most readily, so I got to go with the guy that rings a bell. And Louis Sharp was a hell of a lineman, man. And, great player here for the organization. And yeah. If we're going to dedicate 6-7 to anybody, it's got to be for the home team. You know that.
So episode 67 in recognition of former Arizona Cardinal Louis Sharp. And I don't know that I recall watching him play. Like, I think he was before I got here. But when you hear people that did see him play talk about him and talk about his game, what he did on the field, and particularly for a team, let's be honest, like you're transitioning, with this team pre-stadium in Glendale, there wasn't a lot to celebrate, but Louis Sharp on the football field was something this franchise could be proud of.
And I think that's the key. Even though the team didn't have the overall success, I think there was still a player here and there that you could definitely get behind and root for and hope that they do well. I know my brother, Ron Wolfley, your good friend, he was one of those guys that transitioned from St. Louis to here. The jet stream, Roy Green was another guy that transitioned. Yeah. So, there were a few players here that you could readily recognize their name and guys that had a little bit of personality. So it wasn't completely bare. It just, you didn't have the overall success that you would like as a team.
Played for the Cardinals in St. Louis from 82 to 85. Did a stint in the old USFL and then back with the Cardinals from 86 to 94. So made the move out here with the team at that point. So Louis Sharp, number 67. Other thing I need to do real quickly, we do appreciate our listeners on Train and Grose. And hit us up on Twitter at Train and Grose, and we'll give you a shout out. And if you happen to have my phone number or B-Train's phone number or Sean's phone number, send us a text. And I got to do this because we're going to go back a couple of episodes of the podcast. And I sent you this text, but Tom Duke, who is a regular listener to the program from New Mexico, he sent a text. If you recall, Sean asked us a question in Pump the Brakes about the on-air TV or the TV character that died in an episode that really impacted you.
Or movie.
And but both you and Sean had good answers to that. And I was like, I don't know. And so Tom Duke said that time that a TV show made me cry was The White Shadow, when Jackson got shot in a liquor store after winning the state championship. And wow. I love The White Shadow, and I'm ashamed that I forgot about that. So shout out to Tom Duke for keeping me honest, and appreciate the comments and appreciate the listening. And B-Train, you'll also you need to be nice now. I know how you feel about this. Tom Duke is Meg's boss in New Mexico, but he is a Hall of Famer from the University of Southern California. Now I know how you feel as a Fighting Irish, but since he's a listener, you got to cut a USC alum a little bit of love here.
Cheer, cheer for old Notre Dame. Wake up the echoes cheering her name. Send a volley, cheer on high. Shake down the thunder from the sky.
So I'll take that as a hard pass and the the
No,
smoothing
big
of
shout
the
out. Shout out. Big shout out.
yeah.
Always.
Well, and
Anytime
now
we
let's
have
be
listeners, big shout outs.
and we'll be honest too. He played volleyball, so that's not a sport that Notre Dame and USC did a lot of battle in. So, but he is a Hall of Famer nonetheless. Had his number retired by USC, and
That's dope.
most importantly, out of all of that, he is a regular listener to Training Gross.
We appreciate him. We appreciate him and all the other listeners as well.
Give us a follow on Train and Grow or at Train and Gross on Twitter. All right. Final Four just wrapped up this past week in New Orleans, and a lot of subplots, a lot of stories. But I think the story of the weekend, of course, it was like a convention of the Blue Bloods. When you look at the teams that were there, and of course the championship game, Kansas and North Carolina. You had Villanova and Duke as part of the Final Four. So it was the who's who of college basketball.
It was, and it was so weird because all four teams had blue as one of their primary colors. So it was kind of hard. I could only imagine going down Bourbon Street and, you hear a shout, "Go Blue." You don't know who they're cheering for because all four teams had blue as one of their dominant colors. So it had to be one of those surreal type of situations out there, but I'm sure there were a lot of fans out there, and all four programs were well represented, I'm sure. And anytime that you can go to New Orleans and have a good time, it usually makes for great stories down the road.
So I was watching the game on TV and then the wrap up or the post game show, and Charles Barkley, I thought, those guys do such a good job on the studio show. And they transition, it's the same sport, but it's a different game, the NBA and college basketball. And the transition from the TBS crew back and forth between NBA and NCAA is great. But Charles Barkley, I thought, had just the perfect comment coming out of that game. He was like, where was this the whole game? Because this second half of basketball these two teams played, particularly Kansas coming all the way back to win this thing. But it was just an amazing half of basketball between Kansas and North Carolina Monday night.
It was, and it was really the tale of two halves, Mike. I think for North Carolina, you felt bad because only playing six players and one of those guys get hurt, they just ran out of gas. And Kansas just had too many guys. They were able to come off the bench with another solid five players, one guy that we know very well here in the Valley. It just one team had an abundance of resources and the other one didn't. They got off to the great start, led by 15 at half, but then you saw that talent, that depth really start to rear its head in that first part of that second half, and North Carolina just didn't have the legs to make shots at the end of the game.
Shout out, as you just said, Remy Martin, formerly of ASU, gets the ring playing for Kansas as he did the grad transfer from Tempe to Lawrence as part of that. Also local connection, number 44 for the Jayhawks, Mitch Lightfoot. He played his high school basketball there in Gilbert, Arizona, Gilbert Christian, and he was contributing a lot down the stretch for the Jayhawks. Nice to see a kid who suffered with some injuries. He was a 6-year kid, got the COVID plus a redshirt year, but he also gets the ring coming away with the national championship.
Mike, how awkward do you think it was for the director of the CAA and Bill Self to be on that podium, and he had to give that trophy to Bill Self, knowing all the sanctions that are going to be coming down on Kansas here in the next couple of weeks or whatever they decide to come down with those sanctions? It's that dynamic just seems so weird, and you just wonder, was there a conversation before the cameras came back, like, hey, let's make the best of this, because there's no way that there's real good blood between those two individuals.
No, well, in many respects, and you're right, that was one of those undercurrents coming. But the head of the NCAA, the president of the NCAA, they don't get their hands dirty with the enforcement stuff. They let somebody else deliver the dirty work. They got an enforcement committee that does all that. But yeah, you could tell a little bit. And the NCAA representation didn't spend a lot of time on camera Monday night after the game. Jim Nance was like, "Yo, give him the trophy. All right, get off the stage and let me do my thing," pretty much. And you know what, though? You look at it, and you and I have talked about this, whether it's football, basketball, whatever. the NCAA rule book and especially in college basketball with the influence of AAU basketball and agents and apparel companies. And I said it, look, the only time you can convince me that there might not be something wrong with your basketball program is, number one, if you don't have an apparel deal with Adidas, Nike, or Under Armour. And number two, you don't ever recruit kids to play AAU basketball. If you can tell me those two things, then I can say with virtual certainty that you might be running a clean program. Other than that, there's stuff going on that you have no idea, even if you're the head coach. And it's part of the problem with and I don't know what the answer is, but you just know it's a fact of life with college basketball.
It really is, Mike. And I think about the 2020 version of the Kansas Jayhawks. That was an even better team than what they had out there Monday night. So the fact that COVID and transfer portals really changed the game in a lot of different ways. Yeah. The fact that you saw a team that didn't get to realize its moment to cut down the nets in the 2020 Kansas Jayhawks, and then this team in 2022 with 3 players from that 2020 team still out there, you felt good for them, but it just lets you know how quickly things change in college college sports as a whole. When you start talking about NIL and guys being able to go to different teams at will and not having to sit out a year, all these different things, it really has changed the landscape of college basketball. And I think this is one of those, once you let the toothpaste out of the tube, you can't put it back in. And this is going to be pretty much the norm for the foreseeable future.
Kansas's pending issues notwithstanding, though, I think there was an interesting dynamic at play here, and I'm glad you brought it up. When you think about what the Kansas Jayhawks in 2022 looked like on the floor, right? Because we talk about how you've got the high-end teams, the blue bloods, if you will, a lot of one-and-dones on those teams, right? Kids make that stopover. But think about what happened with Kansas, and look how important Remy Martin was, a grad transfer. Look at how important it was for them to have a kid like Mitch Lightfoot. Again, he's not a superstar. He's not a guy that's going to the NBA, but he's a guy that's been on campus and in that program for 6 years. And, those are things that we always talked about. Well, look at Gonzaga and that model and how that might be the new wave of the future in college basketball. So I think the transfer portal will maybe level that dynamic a little bit if schools like Kansas are willing to take advantage of it. And you can look at the Kansas Jayhawks, because it's a copycat league like every place else. What do you got to do to get back? This was an older team than you typically expect to see from one of the Power 5 type of schools.
Mike, I really believe that those days of one and dones are as champions. I don't think you're going to see another Anthony Davis type team that was in Kentucky a few years ago. I don't think those days are going to come back around because you're going to need those veterans at the point guard position. You're going to need some of that stability of guys that have been in the program that really understand what the head coach wants to get done and to be able to go out there and execute it. You're just seeing those teams that are veteran and have been around and battle tested. They seem to fare the best now in the NCAA tournament. And before we get off the tournament, Mike, you got to give a shout out to the South Carolina Lady Gamecocks and what they were able to get done this past weekend as well. That a very dominant run by the South Carolina Gamecocks, and you just feel great for that team overall. And Aaliyah Boston, with the disappointment that she had last year, missing that shot in the Final Four and being able to redeem herself and finish it off with a championship. It just made you feel good. And looking at that program and where they came from and where they are now, I mean, my goodness, they've done a great job in turning that whole thing around.
No, absolutely. In fact, I thought for sure you were looking over my shoulder onto my cheat sheet here in terms of what we wanted to talk about. And both on the men's tournament and the women's tournament this year, the TV ratings were way up. And every year, and, it's easy to pile on ESPN, a lot of things that people look at and say, maybe this organization's got some issues. But the exposure and the coverage that they're giving the women's game and the platform that they're giving the women's game, I think is really remarkable. And the numbers bear that out. The men's game is kind of recovering. They went up, I think 18 million was what the average viewership was this year. But the women's game each and every year continues to grow. And that partnership between the NC2A and ESPN is really, really paying off.
Yeah, big shout out to Don Staley and head coach of South Carolina. And Mike, I think when you start talking about the numbers being up around sports as a whole, I think COVID has a lot to do with that, in that people are more comfortable being at home. In years past, guys and people would congregate at bars and go to other people's houses and big venues. But I think with everybody having to be at home and quarantine for the last 2 years, give or take, I think people are really more comfortable now being at home, sitting in front of their own TV and enjoying their favorite sporting event. And I think the numbers are going to bear that out over time.
One thing that got a lot of conversation this year, both the men's game and the women's game, is what the coaches are wearing. None of the coaches on the men's side are back to the coat and ties anymore. They're wearing the pullover from, right? The Adidas or whoever your sponsorship is. North Carolina, of course, the Jumpman. So that's the men's side, and I like it. Wear the shoes, wear the pullover, you look good. Dawn Staley, she broke the internet, though, the other night. The Louis Vuitton look that she had going on, don't take anything away from her team, but the subplot was everybody breaking down what she was wearing on the sideline, the shoes and the coat.
I mean, I don't really care what she had on. She did look fly, by the way. Dawn Staley has always been one of those. She's always fashion forward. So if you want to see what's trending, what's hot, just check her out and what she sports out there for games. But Mike, I'm with you. I think the days of coat and suit and tie, I think those days are done. And the coaches look so much more comfortable out there. You don't have the situation where you have coaches sweating through their outfits, and it's just a bad look. So I'm all for this new sporty look, because if you think about coaches, more times than not, they look more like that in practice and when they're outside of games than they would be, in that situation. So I think this is actually more comforting for the coaches to go out there and wear everyday attire, because now they don't have to look a certain way when they're on the court. They can actually jump around, get excited, do all the things that they used to do. But now they're more comfortable because, they got the fly kicks and the outfit to go with the swag.
Sponsors are happy too. All right,
yeah.
Coaches. Speaking of coaches, the final hurrah for Coach K. And think about this. You two always give me a hard time when I drop an 80s reference, and you're like, well, I was just starting grade school, and Sean Crespin, I wasn't even born yet. So I can do this in reference to Coach K. 1980, I was in high school, and Coach K moves from Army and takes over the Duke program, 1980, 81. And every year, 1980 to 2022, Mike Krzyzewski on the sideline for the Duke Blue Devils, winner of over 1,200 games as the head coach there. And I thought the way the TV handled it was perfect, where they had it was obviously in the big stadium, so they had a wide camera angle of Coach and his wife walking hand in hand out of the arena. I thought that was just perfect.
It was perfect, and you have to tip your hat to Coach K and what he's been to the game of not just college basketball. You think about Team USA basketball and what he's been able to accomplish with the team, and of course having pro players and guys that were big personalities. He was able to get them to still come together and handle their business. Now, it's always easy when you got the most talent on the court, but the fact that they had stars and guys that were rich beyond their wildest dreams, able to really hone in and listen to Coach K and be respected by Coach K, it just seemed like a perfect match for Team USA. So his contribution extends way beyond just college basketball, and the impact that he's had on the game, I think, is immeasurable. And we're certainly going to miss Coach K. And I hope that his successor, he's able to go in. John Shire is able to go in and have half the career, because we saw that with their rivals. Hubert Davis had to follow Roy Williams. I think it worked out pretty well for Carolina. There's a lot of pressure in that 8-mile stretch for John Shire to go in and keep the ball rolling in the same direction that it's been for the last 40-some years.
No doubt. And, it was pretty remarkable Monday night. Obviously, Hubert Davis on the sidelines, man, but I wonder what the over-under was for camera shots of Roy Williams during that game, because he he was getting a lot of camera time. But I think it goes to make the point that whether it's actually looking over their shoulder like Roy Williams was, or just the aura that will be at Duke and at Cameron Indoor and around this basketball team for the foreseeable future, that's a lot. That's a lot. And, it's you got your eyes wide open going into it, but it's still a lot to deal with.
Yeah, you never want to be the guy that replaces the legend. And
No.
For Hubert Davis, the fact that he's been able to do this so quickly, I think they're going to feel really good about the program and how it's going to shape up for years to come, because there's a lot of talent at North Carolina. And I know some of the recruiting classes that he has down the road are very competitive as well. So college basketball is going through a little bit of a shift, but you still see Bill Self as one of those guys that's holding it down for the older coaches, and he's the one wearing the hardware most recently. So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Real quickly, before we get out of here, Shaheen Holloway named the head basketball coach at Seton Hall. We knew that going into last podcast, but since we recorded, they had the introductory press conference at Seton Hall. And a cool thing, because a lot of times when the coach leaves, you're like, oh, man, that sucks. He's leaving his school. He's leaving his kids. It's a short drive between St. Peter's, where Coach came from, and his new job. And his entire team drove from St. Peter's over to Seton Hall, and they were in the room and gave him a standing ovation when they announced him as the new basketball coach at Seton Hall. I thought that was a cool thing for what I think is, whatever you think about with the 2022 tournament, St. Peter's will forever be the story of the 2022 NCAA tournament.
They will be, and they will be that team that always gives that underdog team the hope that they can get hot, make the run, and play well, play their best basketball at the right time, and you just never know. I mean, we saw it with Loyola Chicago, and we've seen it numerous times, Florida Gulf Coast, a few years ago. So there's always those great stories that you can lean on to say, hey, you got the underdogs. Don't count them out, because they're going to bust a lot of brackets. And for St. Peter's, they came out and immediately busted a lot of brackets, and there were a lot of people tearing them up, throwing them out into the trash, because nobody saw them doing what they were able to accomplish. And I think that just created more buzz for this tournament.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it. On the other side, we get into the NBA. The Phoenix Suns still on fire, and we'll take a look around the National Basketball Association. That's coming up next on Train and Grose.
Train and Grose.
We shift gears, going from the NCAA to the NBA. And look, the story of the NBA continues to be the Phoenix Suns. Now, every time they take the court and win a game, it's another record. They set the record for most wins in franchise history. They're at 63-16 right now. That's a winning percentage of just shy of 80%, B-Train, and they're running away with the NBA's Western Conference.
Mike, I really believe that this team is special, and what they were able to do last year was special in and of itself. But the fact that they've piggybacked that with another record season where they're outdoing what they did last year. And I just want to say this before we really get into anything particular. How in the world is Devin Booker not getting the MVP recognition? You're talking about the best player on the best team. When Chris Paul was out, those 15 games, they were 12-3, Mike. And they've always kind of finessed the rules to where you give it to the best player on the best team, and you've justified snubbing some guys who had better individual seasons for that criteria. Well, now you have that situation where you've got an all-star in Devin Booker, a perennial all-star, who's having a great season and has propelled his team to heights that are unmatched in the entire NBA. Why in the world has he not gotten more recognition for MVP than he has?
So here's some stats to back you up as well, B-Train. He's averaging 26.7 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists per game. 4.9, I should say, assists per game. All 12 players in NBA history with a stat line of 25, 5, and 5, which is where he's at, while playing with the team with the best record, has won the MVP. But right now, he's not even remotely close. His odds are plus 7,500. His odds are plus 7,500 which is he's not even in the conversation at that point, not even remotely close in the conversation.
That's ridiculous. I mean, they're always able to finesse it to give it to the best story, but I look around and he's the best player on the best team. To me, that sounds like MVP.
It's interesting, and you're right. And I don't know that there's a good answer as to why. And to Sean's point, yesterday at ESPN.com, they have it as a two-man race between Joker and Joel Embiid. That's who they say is going to win the NBA MVP, one of those two men.
Mike, I look at it, and there's always this narrative that you want to reward better players for what they've done. I think Giannis gets snubbed because they're just tired of giving him MVPs. He's been getting a lot of hardware the last couple years. MVPs, Defensive Player of the Year, Finals MVP, so on and so forth. So I don't understand how you can deny him strong consideration considering what he's been able to do and where his team is. But again, I'm going to shout the loudest for Devin Booker, not because I'm just the biggest Phoenix Suns fan. I am a Suns fan, but when I look at the numbers and the criteria, which a lot of the sports writers have made the criteria, he fits all of them. So I don't understand how he's not getting that consideration and why he's so low. Sean, you said 1 in 7,500. That's absolutely insane for a player of the caliber of a Devin Booker.
The article goes on, they list all the people. So they had the top two, and then the next section down is labeled worthy challengers. And the first one in worthy challenger is Devin Booker. And then after that, it's Luka Doncic. And after that is Ja Morant. So he's kind of lumped in with those three players in terms of who's going to be the next MVP in the NBA. So take it for what it's worth. I agree with you. And I don't know, because in the justification, when they go through and they list this, they don't explicitly come out and say Devin Booker and Chris Paul. But I think there's a lot of that at play, because Devin Booker has blossomed while Chris Paul's been here. And I was reading this to Sean as we were getting set up to go. This came out. Chris Paul has led each of these franchises to record-setting seasons. 2008, he led the Hornets to a 56-win season. 2014, he led the Clippers to a 57-win season. 2018, he led the Houston Rockets to a 65-win season. And, of course, now with the Phoenix Suns, they were at 63 wins and climbing with a handful of games left to go in the regular season. And, as I said, I think there's a lot of people out there, even though they won't say it explicitly, that it's Chris Paul and Devin Booker in Phoenix. And to your point, however you dress it up and however you split the vote, I think that's what's happening to Devin Booker's detriment.
Well, I would say yes, that's fair. But then I think it's also used as an indictment on Chris Paul, because the fact that he's had 4 different organizations where he's helped them set franchise records, he doesn't have a ring to show for any of it, Mike. And that's the bottom line. If you don't have that ring, it don't mean a thing. So I appreciate Chris Paul and what he's been able to do as a leader and a guy that can lead men to great success. But you've got to be able to get it done in the postseason. If he just had one ring, Mike, out of all of that winning, I think people would look at that so much differently than they do now. Yes, it's a nice story, and yes, it speaks highly of Chris Paul, but I think there's always going to be that but until he puts that ring on his finger finally.
Conversely, if Devin Booker is being shorted by the media out there, or the vote for the MVP, Monty Williams is not. It feels like he is the to use Sean's the odds-on favorite. The Las Vegas favorite to win the NBA Coach of the Year. I don't know who else would take that from him. We've talked on this podcast about Eric Spoelstra. And surprisingly, after their little dust up they had a couple weeks ago, you have them 2 games on top in the East. So I guess he would be the second place candidate. But to me, it's got to be Monty Williams and everybody else, doesn't it?
It is Monty Williams and everybody else, but there are some great coaching stories out there that you have to give at least the tip of the cap, honorable mention. But I think this is a makeup call for last year, because I thought he really deserved it last year with what he did with this team from start to finish, they were the best team in basketball, and nobody had the Phoenix Suns at the beginning of the season as the best team with the best record in basketball. And yes, they've done it again. They've set a franchise record, and I think people kind of wanted to wait and see, like, was this just a one-hit wonder? But they know now that Monty Williams is the real deal, and as long as he's got the requisite weapons, he's going to be a very good coach and have very successful teams for a long time here in the Valley.
We're very close to having the playoff seedings virtually set. We know who's in and who's out in both the East and the West, and now we just need a little bit of settling in the middle. The only question in the West is whether or not Denver or Minnesota will escape the play-in game. And then in the East, it's all set except for the ordering. You know that the Cleveland Cavaliers, Brooklyn, Atlanta, and Charlotte, those are your play-in teams on the East. So it's virtually set here as we wind down the regular season. And the big part of that, when you look at the teams that are eliminated, the story that got a lot of attention last night, the Suns beat the Lakers, and guess what? Lakers are out. Lakers will miss the playoffs. They sit 32 games behind the Phoenix Suns right now, 31-48, which translate to a winning percentage of just under 40% for the Lakers.
Mike, I don't want to come off as dismissive about the Lakers, but if you take the logo off of those uniforms of those players, you wouldn't care about that team. The only reason that they've gotten the coverage that they've gotten this year is because of the name that they wear on the front of the jersey. That team has been a disaster from day one, and unfortunately Frank Vogel is going to lose his job because of that. But I don't understand why people continue to talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. The thing that interests me when you talk about the playoffs in the Eastern Conference is, yes, Miami's number one, but then you've got Milwaukee, you've got Boston, and who's the other one? Oh, Philadelphia. They're all in a logjam with the same record, basically, and each game down the stretch is going to matter who they match up with. So I find it fascinating that there's, 3 games left, including tonight, as far as games left in the regular season. Each one of these games is going to matter, and the fact that a lot of these teams are going to face off against each other down the stretch, this is almost NFL-ish, to where they kind of stumbled upon it, is almost dumb luck to a certain degree. But the fact that they have this backdrop as far as a precursor to the playoffs, I love the fact that those seedings aren't already locked in, and these teams are actually playing for something down the stretch.
The Celtics, the Bucks, and the Sixers all separated by a half game right now in the middle of that Eastern Conference race. Miami, they don't have it locked up yet, but they're pretty close. But Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, these last couple games matter in terms of who you want to play or who you want to avoid when you're looking at those matchups. The Western Conference is virtually set in terms of the ordering. Like I said, the only thing to be decided whether or not the Nuggets or the Timberwolves end up with the play-in game. And the Clippers, an interesting story, right? You know, we talk about the Lakers. There will be postseason basketball played in Los Angeles, and the Clippers, to me, are an interesting team in that, are they getting healthy? Can they gel enough to make any noise in the postseason? They're firmly in the middle of that play-in game, and that might not be a terrible thing for them right now. But I think it might be too little too late for the Clippers as they launch into the postseason.
I look at Tyronn Lue, and he just continues to go about his business and being one of the better coaches in all the league. What he's had to deal with his 2 stars not there the majority of the season, and still have this team competing at a high level and being around the playoffs to get into the tournament. I just think it goes unsaid that Tyronn Lue has done a tremendous job after being snubbed by the Lakers, if you will. And I think it's great satisfaction, a former Laker who's now taken over the Clippers and will be the reason that Crypto.com Arena, whatever they call it, I call it Staples Center, that there will be basketball in that arena because of the Clippers and not the Los Angeles Lakers.
And real quickly, as we wrap up our NBA talk, and we mentioned this before, Zion Williamson, man, I don't know what I think about this guy. So the Pelicans are in the play-in without Zion Williamson.
Right.
And all of a sudden, his stepfather's like, oh, yeah, he's going to play. He's coming back. Like, at some point, family members keep out of it. This is professional basketball. We're not talking about the local AAU team. And at some point, doesn't he become a distraction as opposed to anything that's going to help this team? He hasn't been around at all.
Mike, he's already a distraction, and I think at this point we've seen the straw that broke the camel's back. I think Zion Williamson needs to go somewhere else to finish his NBA career and to rejuvenate it, because I think his time in New Orleans is up. And a guy that's only been on the court a handful of games for this organization, who made an all-star team, by the way, I just think that whatever rift is between he and the organization, I don't think it's repairable. And they're on such different wavelengths. I think it would just be healthy for him to move on, considering what they've done and what this team has been able to accomplish without his services, and still be competitive. They've got a good young nucleus, Mike, without Zion Williamson. So I think if you start looking at trades and trying to get draft capital, it's not as important as it would be as in the NFL, but I still think that he is a big piece that could really put the New Orleans Pelicans in a place to really contend in the very near future. I'd say the next 3 or 4 years with a solid haul if they do decide to move on from Zion.
Well, you talk about coaches doing a good job. Willie Green there, his first year with the Pelicans, obviously learned a lot sitting next to Monty Williams here the last couple of years. And Willie Green dealing with all the distractions that go with that, with a team that's not used to winning. Again, granted, it's only the play-in, but for New Orleans, that's a step up, right? So, shout out to Coach Green for getting his thing done there with the Pelicans. All right, B-Train, we'll step aside here. We usually lead with football. We usually kind of get into the NFL and things like that. Not a lot going on, but still, it's the NFL, so there's a lot to talk about. We'll do that next on Train and Gross.
Train and Gross.
Put the cat out. We'll continue Train and Gross, broadcasting from our respective home bases today, as the cat wanted to be part of that. So I had to tell him, sorry, nobody cares what you think. All right, let's do some NFL news and notes. B-Train, a lot to get to, and I can't help but think the Los Angeles Rams are kind of changing the landscape of how we look at draft capital. Like, you hear that term a lot. Well, the Rams built a Super Bowl champion without a lot of draft capital. They don't have a lot of draft capital going forward. And now the Saints and the Eagles kind of, I don't even know how to describe this, so I'll read it to you. The Eagles are sending, I don't want to do it this way. They traded draft picks. The Saints moved up. And there was a lot of draft picks and a lot of number ones moving around. And I think the key here is, I think people are getting a little bit loose with draft picks now, and I think the Rams have a lot to do with that.
Well, I always look at it a case-by-case basis. And I think for the New Orleans Saints, they've had a change at the top. When you talk about the fact that Sean Payton is not the head coach anymore, you see, Dennis Allen, is he going to take this team in a different direction? Is he going to want to put his stamp on it his way with the quarterback? And what is this offense going to look like? Because you look at the last couple of years, Drew Brees is gone. Now Sean Payton is gone. That was basically the identity of the New Orleans Saints. So now they've got to reestablish a new identity on the fly. And I really believe they're going to try to do that by numbers. And there's a lot of talent in this draft, Mike, as far as offensive weapons. You start talking about receivers. That's one of the deeper positions in this draft. And I think that's a position that they're going to have to really look at aggressively and try to get some players, because to keep up with the NFC South, with what Tom Brady's doing out there, and they saw how he had a championship team built, I think they're going to try to mimic a lot of what that is. But I think they moved up to try to get in front of some of the teams that had some of the same needs that they did.
Well, and I think we'll know for sure once the draft happens, right? I think this thing will either make sense in a good way or a bad way for the Saints once this settles, because they have to have something in mind for the upcoming draft. And the prevailing wisdom is, look, with what they got with this trade with the Eagles, they can move up into the top 5 of the upcoming draft if they wish. They sit at 16 and 19 now, and they can get themselves into the top 5. So if they do that, then it makes sense. If they don't, I read a tweet by Joe Banner, who, of course, was the former president of the Browns and the Eagles, and he called this one of the most lopsided trades the NFL has seen in a long time. And he goes to break down the numbers, but he said, unless they go get a quarterback somewhere, this makes no sense from the Saints' perspective.
I don't think quarterback is the biggest need for the New Orleans Saints, Mike. I think they've got to get players. They've got to get multiple players in order to compete in today's NFL. You can't just have one receiver, one quarterback. You've got to have guys, plural, that they can throw to. And I think Jameis Winston will do the job. Yeah, they might want to draft one for the future, but you can always find that guy in the second, maybe third round. So I don't know what their game plan is, but I think it's going to be to get as much capital and get as many players to help them win now as they can.
All right, moving on. Rob Gronkowski, he's 50-50 as to whether or not he's coming back in his mind.
I don't think he's 50-50. I think he looks at the Bucs and what they're doing. I think he wanted to wait and see what the head coaching situation was going to be. I think he saw his good friend Tom Brady kind of move Bruce Arians to the side just a little bit. Yeah, they're going to say the right things in public, but Tom Brady wasn't coming back unless the situation was exactly like he wanted it. And I think BA, unfortunately, was part of that change that he needed to see in order to come back for a 23rd season. So I think for Rob, knowing that his guy is coming back, I think it's just a matter of maybe getting a few more dollars and seeing if they're going to court him the way that they did the first time around when he was in retirement already and contemplating making a comeback.
Speaking of contracts breaking the bank, every time we get together to do a podcast, there's another one. Stephon Diggs, pay the man, and they did. Took care of Stephon Diggs up there in Buffalo.
Mike, I really believe that you're seeing a culture change in Buffalo. This isn't something that we normally saw Buffalo do as an organization. They didn't pay big contracts to a few players. Of course, we know Josh Allen has got his money, and there's been a few other players get their money. But now you see with Stephon Diggs, a guy that has a lot to do with the success of Josh Allen, I'm sure he was in the ear of the general manager and the owner saying, we need to lock this guy up. As long as I'm going to be here, I want him here. And that goes a long way when your franchise quarterback validates you. And I think Aaron Rodgers could go a long way in taking some notes from the young guys. Hey, this is how you take care of your guys, by making sure you fight for them and making sure they stay around. So you'll have their services as long as you need them.
Daniel Jeremiah is an NFL Network. He draft expert supposedly, and we'll see how smart this guy is. But he made a comment this week on social media that a lot of people latched onto, and it's this: the top 20 edge rushers in this year's NFL draft could be difference makers coming into the league. Now, I don't know how these things go, but when you look at how drafts shake out, when you talk about 20 players deep at a position, you're getting into the 5th and 6th round, right? Maybe even the 7th round at certain positions. So to say there's 20 players at one position that could be difference makers, that's surprising to me. But the other thing that it does is it goes back to the point that you just made about changes in the NFL and how important it is to have that difference maker on the edge. You got to be able to find it, whether it's in the first round or maybe you get lucky late in the draft. Edge rushers are difference makers, and you got to have them.
Mike, look at the AFC West. Look at how many difference makers at pass rusher each team has. You talk about with the Los Angeles Chargers, Joey Bosa, now Khalil Mack. You talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. You have Chandler Jones coming now to pair with Max Crosby. You talk about Randy Gregory out in Denver to go with Chubb. I mean, it's a free-for-all. If you don't have those guys, it's going to be very difficult to win. You look at the Los Angeles Rams, the reigning Super Bowl champions. They had a Von Miller to go with the Aaron Donald. So if you don't, with all apologies to Rob Bates and DJ Easy Rock, it takes two to make things go right.
There you go. Well, he's right. We'll see. And we'll see if GMs and front offices are changing, see if we see those edge rushers bubble up and move higher. But 20, that's a big number, man. That's a big number. And I think you start talking about depth. I think you want depth at that position because it's becoming a passing league more and more with all of these great quarterbacks that are in the league right now and these great receivers. You've got to be able to neutralize them somehow.
And you better have some great corners, and you better have some guys that can bend that corner and get after your quarterback. Because if you let those quarterbacks just pick you apart all day long, these guys will put up astronomical numbers, and you'll see 6,000 yards here in the near future if you allow these offenses to get that advantage over defenses.
All right, that's a fair point. We'll keep an eye on it and see how this thing shakes out in the upcoming draft. All right, real quickly, wrapping it up here in football, kind of going back to the college game a little bit. Now, I don't even know if you saw this because you were busy at work this afternoon, but your alma mater made a little bit of news this afternoon. They're going to be playing Tennessee State in 2023. Eddie George bringing his squad up to South Bend. And I love this story. I think it's a great story. And you read about it because a lot of times, let's be honest, like you look at it and it's like, okay, here's a money game. And that's fine. I mean, that is a reality in college football, right? But the subplots around this game, you've got what Eddie George is trying to get done there at Tennessee State. You talk about the resurgence of historically black colleges and universities playing football. You got Dion and others coaching these programs. And a school like Notre Dame to give Tennessee State a platform. They brought Tennessee State up to South Bend for a news conference. Except for Jerome Bettis getting asked the last question, it was all good as far as Tennessee State was concerned. But I think this is a good thing. And Jack Swarbuck, I think that's how you say his name, the athletic director at Notre Dame, he talked in glowing terms about what they're doing at Tennessee State and how they're building that program and how Notre Dame is proud to be on the football field with Eddie George and his team.
Mike, I think with everything that's going on with Notre Dame, I couldn't be prouder of my alma mater. And somewhere Deion Sanders is like, damn, why couldn't I get this done before Eddie George? And the thing that you see with Eddie George is he's a high-profile guy just like Deion. He's a former Heisman Trophy winner. He's a guy that was a multiple-time Pro Bowler in the NFL and a guy that has a lot of history with Notre Dame who once upon a time played at Ohio State. Oh, by the way, the head coach at Notre Dame, what alma mater did he go to? That would be Ohio State. So that's also their guys looking after each other. And so I just think that this makes a lot of sense as a product of parents who both went to HBCUs. This is all they ever wanted. They are so happy right now because they just wanted the opportunity. Nobody said that they were going to be able to win, but just be on the field and have that exposure. So now you can start to build your program so where in years down the road you say, hey, I can be in those big games too. I don't have to go to a Power 5 school in order to get that attention. I can go to a HBCU and I can still represent and get the exposure that I need.
Well, no, absolutely. And the other thing, let's be realistic here. The other part of it is, we can talk about this. The other end of it is the business side, right? In our first segment, we talked about St. Peter's, the big lift that they got financially out of that deep run into the NCAA tournament. And guess what? This isn't breaking news. Tennessee State's budget isn't as big as Notre Dame. So a game like this where they get, I don't know, they'll publish it at some point in the future, but somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million to play a game in South Bend and to have the exposure that comes with playing Notre Dame on NBC is going to do remarkable things for that athletic department.
Mike, just think about this for a second. If you're Deion Sanders, you missed out on that first opportunity with Notre Dame, but don't tell me for 1 second he hadn't been on the phone blowing up Florida State, Miami, Florida, one of those schools where he's from, and he's got that name and cachet. He wants to be able to go down there and recruit, and the best way to do that is to go and play a game against those teams and to have any kind of success down there. He could go and steal one, maybe two of those 5-star guys and really change his program at the drop of a dime.
No, absolutely, no doubt about it. Like I said, I saw that thing, and they had video from the press conference. Like I said, kind of cool if you get a chance to watch it. Jerome Bettis asking Eddie George, "Do you think you can win the game?" Type of comment. It was good. It was good to put that program in the spotlight. And shout out to your alma mater for being part of that.
Oh, no doubt about it. Right. I'm a proud alum today.
There you go. All right, here's the deal. Segment 1, 2, and 3. It's just a lead up to Pump the Brakes and to dad jokes. And that's coming up next on Training Grose. Welcome back, Train and Grose. That's what everybody tunes in for. That's why we put it at the end. It's time for Pump the Brakes and Dad Jokes. And,
That's right.
We turn it over to Sean Crespin, who runs this fine part of the podcast.
Yes, sir. As you guys know how it works, I'm going to give you some statements from around the world of sports. You tell me if you're pumping the brakes on it or if you're rolling with that statement and why. All right, so we'll start in the NBA. Adam Silver had some media availability as the NBA is wrapping up their regular season, and he was talking about the trend of star players not playing a full complement of games. So pump the brakes or not, B-Train, will start with you. The NBA and the stars taking those rest days, the load management, as we've talked about so much the last few years, is a problem for the NBA. Pump the brakes or not?
Pump the brakes. I don't think it's a huge problem. I think with 82 games, you get 41 games at home, 41 on the road. You've known a lot of these guys, a lot of the stars are stars because they've been around for years. So, yeah, you may not have gotten to see them this year, but if you're talking about LeBron James taking the night off, LeBron James has been in the league how many years? And if you haven't had a chance to see him in the last 19, then it's hard for me to have a whole lot of sympathy. I understand that some families, they only get to do it once, and with the cost of tickets and everything else, and with COVID and everybody being pinched and putting the squeeze on from a financial standpoint, you don't have the luxury. But man, these guys play enough games. You see them play enough. I just can't drum up the outrage for it.
I'm right there with you, B-Train. Pump the brakes for me as well. Look, the owners are asking for this at some level, right? You play 82 games, especially last year, the COVID year, when you squeezed the games and you were playing, so many games back to back. You add the play-in games. You're putting a lot of wear and tear on your stars. And I think you have to trust the players and the coaching staff and the training staff to say, look, load management, particularly when you get these older guys. I mean, like you said, LeBron, 19 years. Like, you want the stars to be around year over year. That's more important to me than stars being available night after night. Like, if you're playing in Cleveland on a Friday night and Toronto on a Saturday night, sorry, Toronto. Like, that's the luck of the draw from a scheduling standpoint. So for me, it's not so much an issue. Like, I got a bigger issue with AD taking off half of the last 2 years. Like, you want to talk about issues, like, get these guys like him and Zion, get them healthy, get them out there, right?
Let me ask you this, though. Let me ask you this: Why did it all of a sudden become a necessity to have the load management and so forth? You go back and look at guys and then the amount of games they played in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Load management wasn't a thing. I mean, it's not like 82 games in the NBA is new. They introduced that schedule in the 67-68 season, and it's just in the last 5, 6, 7 years that we're really talking about this. So why is it all of a sudden now a necessity?
I think it's.
Well,
I think too. It's a money thing. It's like, you look at it. It's 19 years of LeBron. Nobody back in the 70s. Nobody was making LeBron money. They were playing games on tape delay on CBS in the middle of the night from a championship standpoint. This is a product now, and this is going to sound crass when I say it, but the players are a commodity at a certain level. And so if you're a team that has a star, you got to take care of him. Whatever it takes, it takes.
I look at it too, and you start looking at the closeness of games there are now. You could play 3 games in 5 days. And for a lot of these guys, the bodies just don't hold up like they used to, because the games used to be a little more spread out, if you will. And I just think with more technology and more knowledge of how the body works, guys are just being smarter about taking care of themselves and being in it for the long haul. And if you really want to talk about load management, how about not having so many games? And I know the owners are going to brush back and be like, well, not as many games, not as much salary. So it's always the money. You always follow the money, Mike. We've talked about that for over a decade. Follow the money. The money is always going to be the thing that drives a lot of decisions that are made in professional sports.
Yeah, and the less games feels right too, right? I mean, I think we've brought this up before in the past. When you've had those lockouts or the strikes and you've started at Christmas-ish in the NBA, that season, that 62 games almost feels about right anyway. But that is something that's on the table. Commissioner Silver said, quote, "If we have too many games, that's something we should look at as well. It's something as we sit down and we're looking at new media deals and looking at new collective bargaining agreements that we will be studying." So there potentially could be some less games coming in the NBA. What is coming tomorrow, as we record this on Wednesday on the 6th, Tiger Woods returns to the Masters this week. His improbable return to playing professional golf will come to fruition tomorrow at the Masters of all places. Pump the brakes or not, Tiger Woods is the most important sports figure to his sport in history.
Oh, I'm going to pump the brakes on that one. Tiger makes the casual fan of golf actually watch golf, but nobody has dominated their sport like Michael Jordan. When you think of the shorts, how the shorts look, how the uniforms look, you talk about the shoes. He's still selling shoes. He hadn't come up with a new shoe in 20 years, and he still is the number one selling shoe out there, hands down. You talk about the wristband on his elbow. Not only did aspiring players back then want to do it, but then you had the Kobe Bryants who did the exact same thing. Like, he took the whole style from a Michael Jordan, and you still see his imprint all over sports. And anytime that you see that Jumpman logo, there's only one man you're thinking about, and that's Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Well, that's an interesting thing, too, because the Jumpman logo, watching the game the other night, you saw North Carolina, but when you have other colleges like Michigan and others are wearing Jumpman, right? So it transcends. I guess I'm going to agree with B-Train on that, but it's hard to underscore the importance of Tiger Woods to the game of golf. And they treat him with such kid gloves, right? Because they know, you look at what the purses at a golf tournament was pre-Tiger Woods and post-Tiger Woods. And when Tiger Woods is playing, the TV ratings, what they are when he's in a tournament and he's not in a tournament. And this weekend, you don't think CBS is happy that Tiger Woods is going to give it a go? My goodness, if he makes it to I'm not even talking about winning. I'm like, if he makes it to the weekend, if he makes a cut after the injury that he sustained from that car accident, that's remarkable. And the casual, we've been talking about it, the reason you mentioned Michael Jordan and the reason we talked about load management, it's money, right? And what Tiger Woods means to the game of golf and how other people have benefited off of Tiger Woods' golf game throughout the course of his career has been remarkable. So if it's not Tiger, if it's not Michael Jeffrey Jordan, you shouldn't have done that. You're confusing me. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods he's right there on his heels.
Yeah, I think it's one A and one B with those two right there. I mean, because Grose, you brought something up in the last topic about the NBA and when it was tape delayed. They were still tape delaying playoff games until May 16th of 1986. It was Game 3 between the Lakers and the Rockets on May 16th of 1986. And that Jordan era really pushed the NBA to an all-new height, right? And the importance of him on the game of basketball, on the NBA, I think is right there with him. I think it's really a 1A, 1B type situation, and you could really put either one, wherever. They're both that influential on their sport, in my opinion.
Well, I think
I'm not diminishing.
Go ahead, B-Train. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not diminishing Tiger's effect, his impact on golf. He has a tremendous impact, but you think about what Michael Jordan, his impact, and he hasn't played in 20 years.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods is still playing. And that's the input that he has. When he stops playing, will he have an effect on future golfers? Will future golfers be wearing the TW logo on their hat and on their shirt? I don't know. Will they be wearing Tiger shoes? I don't know. But we already see Michael Jordan, 20 years post-career, he's still a very influential figure in basketball. Oh, by the way, he does own a team in the NBA. So you think about that influence as well. To me, Michael Jordan still has his hands all over his sport, even as a former player and not a current one.
So the Masters... Go ahead, Grose.
I'm sorry, real quick. I was just going to say it'd be interesting just going sport by sport, though, just to look at that. And we don't have time, but you think about the Williams sisters in women's tennis,
Yep.
and you could Wayne Gretzky in the sport of hockey, and you could go on and on each sport by sport. It'd be kind of an interesting topic to do a deep dive on at some point.
So the Masters starts tomorrow. Major League Baseball starts tomorrow. Pump the brakes or not, you'll watch over 2.5 innings of baseball on opening weekend.
Pump the brakes.
Pump the brakes.
Isn't that sad, guys? And it's awful, but it's true.
That was a head-on collision.
Yeah, but I'm forgive me, but I gotta sing this song. I got work to do. I got work, babe. I got a job, babe. So the only reason I won't be tuned in is because I'll be on the field teaching my young lions. But baseball unfortunately has kind of lost its place, if you will, in the minds of a lot of sports fans out there. This last labor situation, I think, really kind of turned people off, and there weren't a lot of people turned on anyway. So they've got some major. They've got to do a complete Maricopa in order to get these fans back, because there's a lot of fans that are completely turned off by the game as we speak.
Well, and especially in a town where we live, that the owner doesn't care about baseball, right? And you look at, there is just no interest or enthusiasm around the Arizona Diamondbacks. So that makes it hard, to do that. I would imagine if I'm in Detroit right now talking about the NBA playoffs, I don't really care, right? Because the Pistons are going to miss it again. If I'm in, I don't know, another city that, another sport, like if you've got such a bad product going on right now, you can see how that happens, right? And you have the exact polar opposites in Major League Baseball sitting in this division. You've got the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers. And unfortunately for sports fans in this town, you are on the wrong end of that spectrum. So, I might sneak a peek, but, 2.5 innings, that's going to be a stretch, Sean.
Go Astros.
Go Astros. Number 4, Kyler Murray, according to a Bleacher Report article, which has quarterbacks who are on the hot seat in 2022. He lands on that list. So pump the brakes or not, this is a big year for Kyler Murray's future with the Arizona Cardinals. You would say he is on the hot seat.
Pump the brakes. If you can tell me that there's going to be a quarterback in the next 2 to 3 years come out of college that will have the same amount of talent as Kyler Murray, then I'll be willing to listen. But you're talking about a guy that was Rookie of the Year offensively, a 2-time Pro Bowler the next 2 years, and a guy that has really record-wise gotten better each and every year. Now, you can say he doesn't have everything to do with that, or he didn't have everything to do with that, but when he played, he has been productive. Now, he's made some bad decisions, and he's pouted, and he's looked like a whiny baby at times. But you cannot ignore the talent that Kyler Murray is, and until you can find somebody that can replace him and give you equal value, then you don't even think about that. And right now, as you look at the landscape of college football, there isn't that quarterback out there that can do what Kyler Murray does.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, B-Train. The other thing that strikes me with this whole Kyler Murray story, it's like, we see what we see on TV. We see what we see, the sideline shots, or what we get those anecdotal reports from the media. And I don't know if this was a concerted effort on certain people's behalf, but, Christian Kirk took a break from counting all his newfound money and went on and did a national interview and talked about what a great experience and what a great quarterback Kyler Murray is. And, he's disappointed to be leaving his hometown, and he wishes he was still going to play with Kyler Murray, yada, yada, yada. Colt McCoy coming back and like, hey, we've got unfinished business, and I can't wait to keep working with Kyler Murray. So people that have been around him are almost going out of their way to make these comments, where it very easily would have been, Christian Kirk could have talked about anything he wanted with his new contract and didn't have to go out of his way to be so effusive with Kyler Murray. And Colt McCoy could have said, hey, look, man, I just want to collect one more paycheck before I retire, and left it at that. So it's just interesting to see how this is all playing out. At some point, the contract's going to happen. The numbers are what the numbers are, right? It's going to happen. And to B Train's point, if you're Steve Keim and the Cardinals and you want to move on, show me a better option. Show me a better option right now.
Yeah, the article finishes up by saying Murray might not seem like a prime hot seat candidate, but the idea of the Browns dumping Mayfield seemed unfathomable this time last year. Yet here we are. Murray must prove that he can do more than put up good numbers in the regular season. That's how the little blurb wraps up there on the Bleacher Report article about Kyler Murray.
Okay, two things about that really fast. One, you talk about Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk was a teammate of his once upon a time at Texas A&M, so they are very good friends. And if you're the backup quarterback, you don't say anything controversial to mess up your checks. All you want to do is make sure that you do everything that is asked of you. Hold that clipboard, keep your hair cut on game days, and make sure you're the most popular guy in the locker room and in the stadium. So he ain't saying or doing anything to mess up that gravy train.
No, and that's my point. Neither way, and those guys didn't have to say a thing. Was my point. To your point,
they did their friend assignment.
There you go. Backup quarterback seen and not heard, but I get it. All right, we'll see.
Pop culture time. Easter's 2 weeks out. Apparently, Cold Stone Creamery is going to try to get you in the mood now by offering a official Peeps flavored ice cream. So pump the brakes or not, Peeps are the only holiday candy worse than candy corn.
Pump the brakes. There's a lot of bad candy out there.
What's worse than candy corn?
Mounds, Almond Joy.
No,
they're worse.
Not worse than candy corn. Is the absolute worst garbage crap candy in history.
Twizzlers, licorice and candy. Get that out
holiday
of here.
candy.
All right, I'm pumping the brakes on your take on that one. Twizzlers.
That's not a holiday candy. You say
I did say holiday. I did say holiday, but it has morphed into an overall candy conversation. I think Peeps are the only holiday candy worse than candy corn. Peeps are disgusting. So bad. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, they are bad. But it ain't worse than candy corn. Candy corn is the worst.
Gross.
I got nothing good to say about Peeps. Thank you, but no thank you. Who did you say this?
Cold Stone Creamery.
Yeah, we ain't gonna beat down the door to get over there and eat your Peep flavored ice cream. Ain't happening. But at the same time, I wouldn't do candy corn ice cream either. So
who are these people that keep the candy corn, factories and the Peeps factories alive? Why? How are they so traditional?
There's a lot of people that love them. There's a lot of people
that
love them, man.
Who are these people?
Hey, but I know that there are people in sports currently as players who vouch for candy corn. I'm just telling you right now. And I don't know why they vouch for it, but they love their candy corn. They can't get enough. It's kind of like Notre Dame football. It's like Duke basketball. It's like the Raiders in the professionals. There is no I'm on the fence about them. You either love them or you hate them. Mm-hmm. There is no in between. The Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
You either love them or you hate them.
So I was reading this thing about Peeps, and they listed their best holiday candy, and they listed Peeps as the number 3 best holiday candy.
Oh.
And they said once just an Easter thing, Peeps have transcended their traditional season and now appear whenever there is a holiday. They've got a Halloween version. They got a Christmas version. They even have a 4th of July version of the Peeps.
I'll pump the brakes on that.
Get it out of here.
Absolutely brutal.
Get it out of here.
All right, that's Pump the Brakes today, so you know where we're transitioning to now. It is time for the world-famous dad joke of the week from one Bertrand Berry. As he puts on the glasses, he must put on the specs to do this properly. He's got to turn his phone, as you saw the camera change, because he's got to pull up his hard prep that he does on these jokes. Now, while he's doing that, we'll go over the rules. No matter what, you're going to get one of these. Now, if it was a good joke, you're going to get some laughter. If it's above and beyond and we're all going to tell our friends, you get the standing O. But there is that chance that it could just not quite land, and he gets. There's always that chance. So, B-Train, from here, you take it, my friend. Where are we going this week?
All right, here we go, fellas. The weirdest summer job I ever had was cleaning the monkey cages out at the local zoo. That crap was bananas.
There you go.
Grose?
Sean?
Grose?
I don't have the buttons, man. You're up.
I don't know if that one landed, man. I may have to.
What are you talking?
I just don't know if it landed.
No, you're wrong. You know that. You know that was crazy. You know that was funny. Stop it. You know that was funny.
That is funny. That's why I sit here. I do this whole podcast just so I can sit between you two on dad jokes.
You want to do it again? No,
I don't want to do it again. Right. It was funny the first time. You old curmudgeon.
Are you standing up, Sean Crespin?
No, I'm sitting down.
Yeah, see, my theory holds true.
Well, it's different. There's a different. I don't have to like.
Yeah, you're in your. Yeah,
no, I don't have to run the board. Like everything is. I have to sit down to do it here because I'm clicking things on the computer. The difference is
you're in your house and he's in his house. That's
he's
the difference.
So upset right now. Listen, it was Grose. Grose. Which button would you have clicked?
I would have hit the same one you did on that one.
Okay, Okay. See, I'm just trying to be real here on the weekly podcast.
But I'm in my house too, so that's cool. We're getting a dad look now. We're getting the side eye.
We are. For those that aren't watching this week's version, the specs have come off and we're getting the side eye.
The side eye. All right, that's going to do
looking
it
at us like you looked at quarterbacks back in the day.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and be sure to follow us on Twitter, at least for now, at Train and Grose. We'll see you next time for episode number 68.
Holla.